Okay, good evening, everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Bruchim Haba, we're continuing our shiurim on Sefer Shemais. We have an amazing topic tonight on the Aseret Hadibros. The shiurim on Sefer Shemais are dedicated by the Israeli family. The shiurim of 5786 are dedicated by the Israeli family. Le'iloi Nishmas, Malka Bas Dina, the Malka Bas Yosef, and the Neshama B'Shem Aliyah should be Melodies Yisro for her family. Abias Kol Tzedek. Sefer Shemais is dedicated by Dr. Zakheim Umishpachli Nishmas Shom Eliezer ben Rav Yaakov Zakheim, Rivka Bas Tuvi Halevi, Rav Dov ben Rav Yaakov Tzvi HaKoyen. Tonight's shir is dedicated by. It could be you. We're looking for someone to dedicate tonight's shir. If anybody wants to sponsor tonight's shir, that is available. Okay, we have an amazing topic tonight. Before we begin with tonight's topic, we have some very good news. First of all, the new Sefer, Birchas HaTzadik, is now in America. You could order it with free shipping on our site, RabbiDG.com. You could get it in Z Berman's. They already ordered 2 boxes. When I was in the store, they were going, the pile was going down, 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 down. So get it while it's available. You could get it with free shipping at our site, RabbiDG.com. Now, this just came out, Rabbi Meir Balanes in Yiddish. In case you want to read it in Yiddish, you want to upgrade your Yiddish, you want to learn Yiddish, get the English, and then you could compare it. We're approaching the Yom Tov of Purim. We're Shloshim Yom Kodim Achag. Make sure you have the concealed and the revealed. This is the biggest of all the art scrolls, over 500 pages on Purim. Amazing material. And then make sure you have the little ones to put in your Shalach Manas. Okay, this way you put in each Shalach Manas, or when people come to your house, you could give it to them. And then Maggid Harakiah on Purim and Lashon HaKodesh. So make sure you're well stocked and you have what to learn. Okay, Parshas Yisro. We have a very important topic tonight. This week is the Parsha of Kabbalas HaTorah and the Aseret HaDibros, the 10 Commandments. And you may be aware that while every pasuk in the Chumash has cantillation notes, has musical notes, where a lot of the secrets of the Torah lay in the musical notes, the Aseret HaDibros has 2 sets of musical notes, has 2 sets of trup. In the Chumash, as the psukim continue, there's 1 set of trup. It goes like this: Anoichi Hashem Elokecha Asher hoitzeisicha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeis avadim. Soif pasuk. Lo yiyelecha Elohim achirim al panai. Soif pasuk. Lo yisa'as elecha fesel v'chol tmuna Asher b'shamayim imav Asher ba'oretz mitachas Asher b'mayim mitachas la'oretz. Soif pasuk. The trup is not that dramatic. Most of the musical notes are rather simple. You don't have that many fancy trup. There's not that much drama in it. But then you have something that's either printed at the end of the parsha or on the bottom of the page, another set of trup, which is called tamelion. And this tamelion is much more dramatic. So let's say in the regular Chumash, when it comes to Shabbos, it says, Zachar es yom haShabbos lekadeshai sheishes yomim tavoid v'yasisa kom lachtecha. But when it comes to the tamelion, Zachar es yom haShabbos lekadeshai sheishes yomim tavoid. There's drama there. V'yasisa kom lachtecha v'yom hashevi Shabbos lashem Lo yisaseh chol melacha. There's drama. There's munach zarka, munach segal, pazer. None of that in the regular trup. Now there are a number of other important differences. So, for example, we have in the what we call the tam tachtoin. In the first 2 dibros, anoichi and lo yelecha, it's broken up into many psukim. Like pasuk. Like pasuk. Like pasuk. Like sishtach v'lehem. Like pasuk. Like pasuk. In the Tam Elyon, this whole thing is one pasuk. Does anybody know what is the longest pasuk in Tanakh? Anybody know what sefer it's in? We once had a shir on it. It's in Megillas Esther. It has how many words? 43 words. And yet, this first pasuk, according to the Tam Elyon, has 59 words in one pasuk. You know, it never ends. There's no asnachta until after 50 words. There is no pasuk in Tanakh that comes even close. You don't have an asnachta until the last 6 words. So first of all, why is it so long? How is it allowed to be so long? Also, what's the shortest pasuk in the Chumash? Uvnei dan chushim. How many words? 3 words. Really? No, it's not. La tertzach. 2 words. Isn't there a rule a pasuk can't be less than 3 words? All of a sudden, by the Sefer Sadibros, it's so important. According to the Tam Tachtoin, it's loy sirtzach, loy sinaf, loy signoiv. So it's all one pasuk. According to the Tam Elyon, loy tertzach. Now, why is that? Now, there are other discrepancies, and that is we pronounce words completely differently. Anoichi Hashem Elokecha asher lo yelecha Elohim achirim al panoi. Tam tachtoin panoi. Tam elyon lo yelecha Elohim achirim al panai. Why? Here's another difference. In Shabbos, in the Tam Tachtoin, we have Zachar, Kol Melachtecha, Kol Melachtecha, V'asisa Kol Melachtecha. Yeah, we have what's the in the Tam Tachtoin we have Kol Melachtecha. In the Tam Elyon, it's Zachar, Shabbos Kadeshai, Sheishes Yomim Tavoid V'asisa. In the Tam, Elyon, it's Kol Melachtecha. And then it's a mistake. They made a mistake in the Chumash. Okay, so in the Tam Tachtoin, it's Kol Melachtecha. In the Tam Elyon, it's V'asisa Chol Melachtecha. Ignore what it says in your Chumash; it's wrong. Okay, so it's in the Tam Elyon, it's Chol Melachtecha. So you say, what's the difference between Kol and Chol? No difference. Just one is right and one is wrong. Really? Does everybody have to make that difference? No. If a guy lanes, he doesn't have to make that difference. But if a Jew reads the Torah, then he needs to know the difference. Okay, so one is Panai, one is Panai. One is Chol, one is Chol. What other differences are there? There are other important differences. I'm going to tell you about another one. In the Tam Tachtoin, Loi Sirtzach. In the Tam Elyon, Tirtzach. Why? In the Tam Tachtoin, Loi Sirtzach. Tam Elyon, Loi Tirtzach. So how do we explain all of these discrepancies? So let's begin with the Chizkuni. Chizkuni says, by most of the Dibros, by most of the Aseres HaDibros, most of the readings of the 10 Commandments, there are 2 sets of trop to learn. On Shavuos, which is a dugma of Matan Torah, we read Neginois Gedolos, namely, we make out of each dibur a separate pasuk. That can mean a very long pasuk. That can mean a very short pasuk. The first 2 dibros, Anoichi and Loyia, it gets 1 sentence. And we'll have to see why. Why doesn't Anoichi get its own sentence? Why doesn't Loyia get its own sentence? No, Anoichi and Loyia, they're grouped together to become the longest pasuk in the whole Tanakh. Okay. But loy tirtzach, loy tinaf, each one is broken up into the shortest psukim in Tanakh. And the Chizkuni is bothered. We don't find any pasuk less than 3 words in Tanakh. Why in the Aser Sadibros of all places, in the Tam Elyon, which we read, by the way, he says we only read Tam Elyon on Shavuos, but when we read Parshas Yisro in Shavat, we should read the Tam Tachton. You ever see anyone do that? Or this is the first time you're hearing about the Tam Elyon and the Tam Tachton. But the opinion of the Chizkuni is Tam Elyon is only for Shavuos, Tam Tachton is for Chodesh Shavat. Tam Elyon, each dibur gets its own pasuk. Tam Tachton is broken up into psukim, and that's how we read it in Chodesh Shvat. The Chizkuni does not fully explain this, and for that we need to come on to Shalos Tshuvas, Masas Binyamin. Masas Binyamin was a Talmud of the Ramah, a Talmud of the Marshal, and he brings someone who asks 7 questions on these 2 Asaras HaDibros. In a nutshell, some of the questions are, why do we have 2 separate trop for Tam Elyon and Tam? Does anybody know, is there any other place in the Chumash where there's a Tam Elyon and a Tam Tachton? There's one other place. By when Ruvain, Vayelech Ruvain, Vayishkav Imbila, Pilegesh Aviv, Vayishma Yisrael. Pause. There are 2 sets of trop there. There's a Tam Elyon and a Tam Tachton. Maybe a different time we'll discuss that. But this is the main place where we have 2 sets of trop. Why? And why some psukim do you not have 2 sets of trop? For example, the pasuk Lo Sisa, or Kisheshes Yamim, or Kabedes Avicha. Also, why would we group Anoichi and Lo Yelecha into one long pasuk? Number 4, why would we break up Lo Tirtzach, Lo Tinaf into 4 separate psukim? Why? You see, by the way, it's interesting. In the old Chumashim, they don't even mark Tam Elyon and Tam Tachton. They put both trop on the word at the same time, and you're supposed to know when to read trop A and when to read trop E. It's only of recent where they came up with this idea that nobody would ever figure out which trop to read when if they're both trop are on the same word, and nobody's going to know. In these Chumashim it says Tirtzach Sirtzach. Okay, what is it like Zecher and Zecher? It's only of recent that they organized the Chumash in a way where they wrote one is Tam Elyon and one is Tam Tachton. The Masas Binyamin brings a whole slew of 7 questions. Why sometimes it's Tirtzach and sometimes Sirtzach? How could you do both? Is it Panai? Is it Panoi? And he basically says like this. All of these 7 discrepancies all lead to one point. And that is, there's 2 sets of trop. And Al Pi Kabbalah, and those who are familiar with the secrets of the Torah, those who know the Chachmei Emes and the Yoidei Chen, they'll know their Kabbalistic significance to each set. But there is a very simple, elementary difference between the Tam Elyon and Tam Tachton that every Jew needs to know. Just simply in order to know how to be Maver Sedra, how to read Psukim and Chumash. Does anybody know? When I'm Maver Sedra, do I use Tam Elyon or Tam Tachton? No, you can only use one of them. Which one? Not the way we lane it in Shul. You're not allowed to do it the way we lane it in Shul. Dafka not. Okay? And we're going to see. There are 2 sets of trop for the Asar Sadevros. We're going to start with the Tam Tachton, or what we call Neginois Ketanois. Tam Tachton, basically what it's going to do is, it's going to tell you how to break up the psukim. The main principles of breaking up psukim are based on the following word. Asaf, Aleph, Samach, Pei. That stands for Esnachta, Soif Pasuk. The 2 main things you need to know in order to break up a pasuk are, where do you put the Esnachta, where do you put the Soif Pasuk? Soif Pasuk obviously is the end of the sentence. The Esnachta is the major pause in the pasuk. If you're not familiar with what an Esnachta looks like, do you know what an Aleph looks like? Do you know what a Beis looks like? You need to know what an Esnachta looks like. If your mother's Jewish, or if you converted to Judaism, you must know what an Esnachta is. Esnachta is the main stop in the pasuk. It tells you that this pasuk, every pasuk has usually two ideas. Idea number one goes from the beginning of the pasuk until the asnachta. An asnachta is an upside down semicircle with a line on top of it. Okay, I'm going to draw it for you. What does it look? Upside down. An upside down Y. Yeah. Okay, it's like a yarmulke. It's a beanie. It's a semicircle with a line on top. Each pasuk has two ideas. Idea number one is from the beginning of the pasuk. Asnachta. Idea number two is from the asnachta to the end of the pasuk. You're entitled to ask on every pasuk, why is the asnachta there? Rabbi Victor Nebenzal wrote a kuntris on all the asnachtas in the Chumash. Why is it here? Why isn't it there? And sometimes it's not in the typical place. There are many things you can learn out from it. It's called asaf, asnachta, seif pasuk. Only very short psukim don't have an asnachta. This is what we call the tam tachtoin. It tells you how to read psukim. The tam tachtoin is the trup you have in the Chumash. That this is the trup you will use when you're maver sedra. Okay, so for example, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzei Chamer Tzazami Beis Avadim Soif Pasuk Lo Yelecha Elohim Achirim Al Panai Soif Pasuk Lo Yisas Elecha Fesa B'Chol Tmuna Asher B'Shmayim Av Asher B'Oretz Mitachas Snachta Asher B'Mayim Mitachas Oretz Soif Pasuk. This is how you break down the psukim. We're not trying to tell you how many commandments there are, just you need to know how to read the sentences. Now, within the asnachta and the seif pasuk, there's another very important pause, and that is a tipcha. A tipcha. Many are not aware what to do with a tipcha. So if you don't know what a tipcha is, do not lane from the Torah. Because if you run over a tipcha, the Mishnah Berurah says, machziran oisa, you have to go back. You have to go back. Now, the guy's going to get up there. What are we going to do? He doesn't know what a tipcha is. We're going to stop him every pasuk. Tipcha is Bereshis, pause. Bara Elokim, Eis Hashamayim, pause. V'Eis Haaretz, it's a comma. It's a comma. It's so important. The Zohar says the world stands on a tipcha. Bereshis, pause. Bara Elokim, Esnachta. Eis Hashamayim, tipcha. V'Eis Haaretz. Now, you always need to be aware of where the Esnachta is, especially if you're laning. That's the tam tachtoin. So in the tam tachtoin, it's breaking it up into psukim. However, there's something called a tam elyon. And the job of the tam elyon is not to tell you where the sentences are over. The tam elyon is to tell you 10 commandments. So, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, it goes like this. Anoichi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzei Chameretz Mitzrayim Mibeis Avodim Lo Yelecha Elohim Achirim Al Panai. Now we already read enough words that there should be a pasuk. No, we're not even nearly done. Lo Yisas Elecha Fesel V'Chol Timuna Asher B'Shmayim. It's an endless pasuk. It's 59 words. Why? Because we're breaking things up by commandments. The first commandment, Anoichi, includes Anoichi. So you say, but what's Lo Yelecha doing there? Lo Yelecha is the second commandment. No, Anoichi and Lo Yeh, since the Gemara says Hashem said Anoichi and Lo Yeh, B'dibur Echad. So to indicate that Dibur was said B'dibur Echad, it's one long pasuk. So the Masas Binyamin asks, what do you mean? Didn't God say all 10 commandments B'dibur Echad? Says the Masas Binyamin, you have to look at Rashi. Rashi says, first Hashem said, Anoichi lo yelecha, all 10 commandments in one pasuk, in one word, and nobody understood it. The air couldn't process it. So Hashem started again. But after Hashem said Anoichi and lo yeh, Klal Yisrael said, no, we can't listen anymore. It's too painful. It's too frightening. So to indicate that there was something unique about Anoichi and Lo Yeh, the tam elyon groups them together. Okay. On the other hand, in the tam tachtoin, it's Loi sirtzach, Loi sinaf, Loi signaiv, Loi sa'anet. That's one pasuk. You can't have a pasuk of 2 words. There's no such thing in Tanakh. Pasuk of 2 words. But in the tam elyon, we're not telling you psukim. We're telling you commandments. So it's Loi tirtzach. Now, So why is it in the Tam Tachton it's loy sir tzach, and in Tam Elyon it's loy tir tzach? Very simple. Okay, you're lucky you came tonight. Your grandmothers must have prayed very well that you should hear this. There's a very important principle that every Jewish soul needs to know, and that is there's 6 letters in the alphabet, in the Hebrew alphabet. It's called Beged Kefes, Beis Gimel Daled Kaf Pei Taf. These are the 6 letters in Hebrew that could have a dagesh in it, a dot. Beis or vase, beis. Gimel. We don't know exactly the difference between a gimel with a dot, without a dot, but a gimel could have a dot. Daled could have a dot. Kaf or chaf. Pei or fei. Taf or saf. Whenever a beged kefes letter is preceded by a vowel, yud, hey, vav, aleph, it drops its dot. In Kol HaTorah Kula, whenever a letter that has a dot in it is preceded by a vowel, the vowel will make it drop the dot. Hence, loy sirtzach. Loy sirtzach. Loy sin off. Loy signoiv. Because there's an aleph before the taf. You know what you do when you have an aleph before the taf? The taf becomes a saf. When? Always. Whenever you have a vowel before a beged kefes letter, the beged kefes letter will drop the dot. And that's in the Tam Tachton. Yehu. Yehu. Yud, Hey, Vav, Aleph. Or Vav, Yud, Hey, Aleph. However, whatever order. Aleph, Hey, Vav, Yud. 4 letters are vowels. Aleph, Hey, Vav, Yud. If a beged kefes letter is preceded by a vowel, it will drop the dot. So what happened in the Tam Elyon? Why is it loy tirtzach? Loy tipcha. There's a pause. Your pause, it's not preceded by a vowel. There's a tipcha there. Loy tirtzach. What do you do if he says sirtzach? I don't know. You get annoyed. That's all you could do. It's wrong. You can't do it. It's law in the tam tam when you're maver sedra. Loy sirtzach. When you hear it on Shavuos, loy tirtzach. Because in the tam tachtoin, it's mercha tipcha. Loy sirtzach. The 2 words go together. So you have an aleph, and then on tuf becomes a saf. Why is it sirtzach? And in the Tam Elyon is tirtzach. Very simple. Because a word always is it's always patach. Unless it's at a stop. So in the Tam Tachton, it's loy sirtzach. It's the middle of the pasuk. It's a patach. A patach will always become a kamatz at a stop. For example, Megillas Esther. The name is Mordechai, unless his name appears at the end of the pasuk, or at an asachta. Is it panai or panoi? Very simple. It depends where. In the Tam Tachton, it's the end of the pasuk. Lo yelecha Elohim achirim al panoi. It's the end of the pasuk. It's panoi. But in the Tam Elyon, that pasuk is the longest pasuk in the world. Lo yelecha Elohim achirim al panai. So it says in Masas Binyamin, all the discrepancies are explained very obviously between the Tam Elyon and Tam Tachton. Words are always a patach, and at the end of a sentence or at the end of a thought, it's always a kamatz. It's always a tuf unless it's preceded by a vowel. But if that vowel is cut off by a tipcha, then it's not preceded by a vowel. So in the Tam Tachton is loy sirtzach, and the Tam Elyon it's loy tipcha. Tirtzach. If you know what we just said, it explains like 90% of the things in Chumash. Sometimes you want to know, is it koil, is it choil? It's very simple. By the way, that's how I know there's a mistake here. Now, this is a good one, okay? I'm going to tell you, I have a theory. I think why is it in the Tam Tachton, ve'asisa kol melachtecha? Yeah, in the Tam Tachton, it's ve'asisa kol melachtecha by Shabbos it says ve'asisa kol melachtecha, and in the Tam Elyon it's ve'asisa the ve'asisa chom ve'asi. It says shejim tava ve'asisa chol melachtecha. Now I know it's a mistake. The Bir Halacha says it's chal. Now, why would it be chal? The asisa ends in what letter? Ends in a taf, saf. So that's not a vowel. No, think clearly. It ends in a saf, but what sound does that saf make? Sa. It's a hey. It's not ending the asis. It's not a consonant. It makes a vowel. So it's as if it says the asisa with a hey. So that silent hey makes the kol drop the dot. Okay, so that's like a little bit of a curveball. You wouldn't have expected that. But the Bir Halacha says that's the difference between Tam Tachton and Tam Elyon. Fine. So these are two sets of trup. Set number one is Tam Tachton. Tam Tachton breaks it up into psukim. Tam Elyon breaks it up into dibros. I'm going to veer off for a second to take you to tell you a lumdus, because I see the dikduk is a little bit, we're pushing it a little. We're going to come back to it, but I'm going to tell you one of the most astounding lumdus of Reb Chaim Brisker. Okay, you're going to go to Shul the Shabbos, and they're going to announce everyone should stand for the Aser Sadibros. Now, there's a big problem standing for the Aser Sadibros. How can you stand for the Aser Sadibros? You're basically saying that what? That this laning is more important than we didn't stand for other things. So why are we standing for Aser Sadibros? There's even a question: are you allowed to read the Aser Sadibros publicly? People are going to think that only the Aser Sadibros are the Torah. The Rambam paskins in the Tshuvas Rambam, it's Aser to stand for the Aser Sadibros. Rabbi Yoshev writes, you cannot stand, even if everyone in the shul is standing, you're obligated to sit. I just saw today, Rabbi Yoshev said, you're not allowed to stand. Even you may not stand, even if you stick out like a sore thumb. How can you stand? It's connected to Gemara. So Reb Chaim Brisker has an astounding lumdus why you're allowed to stand. There are two kinds of leanings. One leaning is reading psukim. Are the Aser Hadibros more important as psukim than other psukim? No, we believe every word of Torah has kedusha. The words Anoichi Hashem Lekecha don't have more kedusha than Achois Loitan Timna. But there's another way to read it. We're reading it as 10 commandments. The Rambam didn't have the Tam Elyon. He only had the Tam Tachton. The Tam Tachton reads these words as verses, as psukim. So therefore the Rambam said you can't stand. Because if you're standing, you're giving more credibility to these psukim than other psukim. But we who read it as Tam Elyon, Reb Chaim Brisker says, we're not reading it as psukim, we're reading it as 10 commandments. As 10 commandments, they have a special significance. This is the covenant with which Hashem made with the Jewish people. So since we read Tam Elyon, we're allowed to stand. The Rambam only passed we're not allowed to stand because he didn't have Tam Elyon. We have Tam Elyon, so we could stand. That's just an amazing lumdus that Reb Chaim said. Anyway, this is the Masas Binyamin. Therefore, the Masas Binyamin concludes that on Shavuos we read the Tam Elyon, and on Yisro and Va'eschanan we read the Tam Tachton. Does your shul do that? I don't think so. I don't think you'll find a shul that does that. That's the psak of the Masas Binyamin, and officially that is Minhag Ashkenaz. Not only that, that's Minhag Poilen. That we only read the Tam Elyon on Shavuos. Why? Because Tam Elyon is reading them as commandments. When is it significant to read it as commandments? On the day the Torah was given, on Shavuos. On random day, on, Chav Shvat, why do we need to read it as commandments? So the Masas Binyamin paskins, and the Bir Halacha brings this down. You read the Tam Elyon on Shavuos, you read the Tam Tachton on Yisro and Va'eschanan, and when you're Maver Sedra, Tam Tachton. Let's say I made a mistake and I did the Tam Elyon. Do I have to read it again? No. However, the Masas Binyamin continues, the reason why I'm speaking about this so long is out of jealousy. Jealousy for who? For God. Because most Balei Kriya, they don't know the difference between their right hand and their left hand. And when they get to the Aser Sadibrois, they mix up the Tam Elyon and the Tam Tachta and it's such a discombobulated mix-up that they get the whole thing wrong. If they would have picked one of them, that would be a halbatzara. But now they just go back and forth between the Tam Elyon and Tam Tachtain, kimishugain. They're insane. They mix it up. And therefore, the Masas Binyamin says, I just want to set the record straight that you got to pick one. But b'diavad, you cannot mix the two up. You have to do one of them. Which should you do? Shavuos Tam Elyon, Shavad, and Va'aschana Tam Tachta. Now, here's another interesting thing. Anybody know how many psukim in Yisro? I always thought, look in every chumash. Let me see this chumash. Yeah, this chumash also is guilty of it. 72 psukim. Really? No, it doesn't. It says in every chumash, 72 psukim. It's wrong. It's not true. It's straight up wrong. In my new chumash, with the Perush on Targum Unklis of Nesina Lager, it gives 2 simanim. 72 is according to the Tam Elyon. That puts the whole Anoichi and La'yilcha in one pasuk, puts the whole Shabbos in one pasuk. Then there's 72. In the Tam Tachtain, there's 74. Depends. The way it's broken up in the Chumash, the siman is straight up wrong. 74 psukim. Count it. Every Chumash tells you 72. It's dead wrong. Not true. Not the way they break it up. It's 74 the way they break it up. 72 is the Tam Elyon, which they put in the back of the Chumash. So there are 2 sets of psukim. That's the way the Masas Binyamin learns. He still hasn't explained really why is it called Tam Elyon and Tam Tachtain. Why is one Elyon and one Tachtain? Why is breaking it up into psukim Tachtain, breaking it up into Dibrois Elyon? Okay, we now come to a sefer. I don't know if we ever feature. I think maybe one time we featured the sefer. This is not a common. You're not going to learn the sefer in yeshiva. This is one of the most important svarim ever written on dikduk. It's this and Rabbi Yaakov Emden. It's called Sharei Tefillah. Sharei Tefillah was written by Rav Zalman Henna. Rav Zalman Henna was one of the great grammarians. The Pri Megadim quotes him. He's considered one of the greatest authorities in the area of dikduk. And he was also asked, what's the explanation for these 2 sets of trup? So the first thing he says is, did you realize none of the Rishonim talk about it? And then all of a sudden, all these Achronim talk about it, and he says they don't know what they're talking about. So why is it that the Rishonim don't talk about it, and the Achronim all jump on it? He says as follows, and this is a great principle. He says the Rishonim, who they had such great minds, and their minds were open like an expanse, to them these ideas were obvious. It was obvious how to read psukim. It was obvious why we had different sets of trup. It was not needed to discuss. The same way we don't have to write svarim on what the letters of the aleph beis were. They did not have to discuss the various sets of trup. But because they didn't talk about it, the achronim tried to understand it, and they did not explain it in a cogent manner, says Reb Zalman Henna. And he says, I tried to investigate the various customs, the minhag of the Sfardim. Now I want to tell you something. Remember I told you the Rambam didn't have the Tam Elyon? Well, in Yemen, in Taiman, we have a sefer called Even Sapir of a traveler, Rabbi Yaakov Sapir, who traveled to Yemen. And he says in Taiman, they never had the Tam Tachtain. Interesting. The Rambam never had the Tam Elyon. Yemen, they never had the Tam Tachtain. They only had the Tam Elyon. So Rabbi Zalman Henna says, the Sfardim, the minhag of the Sfardim is that they use the Tam Elyon on Shavuos, on Yisro, and on Va'eschanan, and when they learn privately, they use the Tam Tachtain. And then Rav Zalman Henna says that they asked the Rav Menachem di Lunzano in the Sefer Ar Torah. They asked him, Rabbi, why are there Tam Elyon and Tam Tachton? And he said, Tam Elyon is for the tzibor. Tam Tachton is for personal study. And that's what all the Sfardim did. Now listen carefully. Says Rav Zalman Henna, and he was a very sharp man. Okay, if you're the expert at dikduk, you're like sharp like a razor. He said everyone just followed this rabbi, but they never asked him, could you explain why one trup is for the rabbim and one is for the yachid? Nobody had the courage to ask the rabbi why he said that. And because nobody ever asked him, they just accepted it, but it doesn't make any sense. I think he says Reb Zalman Henna, I'm afraid to say this, but I got to tell you the truth. I think he said that because it was too difficult for him to look into the matter. So he said off the cuff, oh, Tam Elyon is for the tzibur and Tam Tachton is for personal study. Says Zalman Henna, he made it up. He made it up. Where did he get this from? Why would that be? He says, instead of, he didn't want to spend 3 weeks trying to understand it, so he off the cuff just said, the Tam Elyon is for the public reading and the Tam Tachton is for personal study, and everybody just went with it. No, they shouldn't have. And now we're going to make a minhag based on what this great rabbi said. We never pressed him on it. No, this is not a valid minhag. This is not a valid minhag. And what? Again, if you say Shavuos, we want to reenact Kabbalas HaTorah. But Yisro, why are we reenacting Kabbalas HaTorah in Shvat? Because we happen to be up to it? I would have thought, well, if we happen to be up to it, we need to read these psukim now. We need to reenact the event. The event only happened one time in that year. We're going to do it twice in the year. Why are we doing it twice? It only happened once. We said, well, it happened twice. Luchos Rishonos, Luchos Shniyos. I hear it, maybe. But and if we want to reenact it, we should be reenacting the whole year. We should have a Tam Elyon for all the parshiyos, So he says what the Sfardim do to always read the Tam Elyon doesn't make any sense. What the Ashkenazim do to only do the Tam Elyon on Shavuos and the Tam Tachton on Yisro and Vaschanan. Also, he says, I don't understand. So therefore, he offers the following explanation that's very controversial and nobody agrees with, except for, I think, maybe the Mishnah Berurah. This is extremely controversial in the world of dikduk. You ready what he says? He says there's two dimensions of Torah. There's ksiv and there's kri. There's the way something's written and the way something is read. The way it's written is the way God gave it to Moshe. The way it's read is the way Moshe gave it to Klal Yisrael. It's kri ksiv. Hashem gave to Moshe the words. That's the ksiv. Moshe gave over to Klal Yisrael. He read it to them. That's the kri. Now, the Rav Zalman Henna brings an amazing example from this week's Haftarah. If you have a chumash, if you could take a look at this is Ayam V'Naira. Did you know that in this week's Haftarah, Yisro, we have the following pasuk: Lemarbe HaMisra u'Lashalom Ein Kates. Lemarbe HaMisra. How do you spell Lemarbe? Lamed Mem Reish Beis Hey. Look in the chumash. You know how it spells it? Lamed, final Mem, Reish Beis Hey. You ever notice that word? Lemarbe. It uses a final Mem in middle of the word. Take out a chumash. You're not going to believe me. Take out a chumash. In the stone chumash, which was the chumash with which Hashem gave Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai, he gave him the stone chumash. You see? It says stone because Hashem gave luchais even. This Moshe got the luchais together with the stone chumash. That was a joke, right? Look in the Haftarah of Yisro. It says, let's see if we could find it. The last pasuk. Lemarbeha misra shalom ein kates. The word lemarbe is spelled with lamid final mem. What in the world is going on? The answer is it's a Greek sieve. It's read lamid regular mem resh beis hey, but it's written lamid final mem. It's written lam rabbe. Question: when you have a contradiction between kri and ksiv, which one is given priority? Kri. We don't really care how you write it. It's about how you say it, yeah? So that shows there are two dimensions of Torah. There's the way it's written and the way it's pronounced. And the Kri will always override the Ksiv. We care how you read it, not how it's written. God gave words. Moshe told us how to read it. Therefore, by the way, there are other examples. There's a pasuk, Ish mi bin Yamin. The nun in the middle is with a final nun. There's another pasuk, Min hasa'ara, mem regular nun hasa'ara. This shows that we just need to be careful. We're more concerned how to read a word than how to spell a word. We don't care that much how to spell it. We care, but it's more important how to read it. The Aseres Hadibrois, there's what God gave to Moshe, and there it's spelled in a certain way. That's how Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the ksiv of it. But the kri, now the ksiv is going to make equal distant psukim out of the whole thing. But the kri is a bit different. The kri is how it's broken up into dibros. And that is what Moshe Rabbeinu gave to Klal Yisrael. Says Reb Zalman Henna, the tam, he says, Lachein bara etzleinu. Look, I'm in page 3, the first column. On page 4, the first column. Kivan shahakriya ikar ubechinasa yisukan kol inyan hazaros. Lachein roi likrois ba'aseres hadibrois psukim beinonim layaruchim b'yoisel kitzarim b'yoiser. That's a tam tachtoin. Lachein bara etzleinu ki roi v'nachem ba'averzel likrois tamid. Okay, let me just clarify. Sorry, I have to flip it. I apologize. The Tam Elyon is what God told Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, the Tam Elyon is what God told Moshe Rabbeinu, and He told it to him in long psukim for Anochi and Lo Yelecha, and short psukim in Lei tirtzach, lei tinaf, lei tignaif. That's odd. Why is Hashem using such long psukim or such short psukim? The answer is we don't care how it's written. We care how it's read. So the ksiv, listen carefully. The ksiv is the Tam Elyon. The Tam Elyon is what Hashem told Moshe. He told Moshe, he told him this long pasuk of 59 words. That's the ksiv. That's the ksiv. And then he told him this really short pasuk, loy tirtzach, and another short pasuk, loy tinaf. That's the ksiv. And that's called the Tam Elyon. And the Tam Tachtoin is the Kri. The Tam Tachtoin is the way it's read. So in other words, the Ksiv is the Tam Elyon. The Ksiv is the Tam Elyon. And the Kri is the Tam Tachtoin. What's the Kri? The Kri is everything in equidistant psukim. Basically, says Reb Zalman Henna, Lachein bara etzleinu, ki roi v'nachain ba'averzeh likrois tamid b'neginois tamei hatachtoin bein b'yachid bein b'tzibur bein b'chag hashavuos bein b'shar hayamim. always use the tam tachton. Should always use the tam tachton, whether it's Shavuos, whether it's Parshas Yisro, whether it's V'aschanan, or whether you're learning on your own. You use the tam tachton. And what Moshe Rabbeinu told Klal Yisrael, that's the tam tachton. The tam elyon is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe me elyon. The tam tachton is what Moshe Rabbeinu told Klal Yisrael. Now it's interesting. He brings a proof from the Yalkut Ruveni, who says, that if you look in V'aschanan, it says loy tinaf v'loy signa, right? It says loy sirtzach v'loy sinaf v'loy signoiv. It says vi. Why? So he says that when Moshe Rabbeinu told it to Klal Yisrael, he told it to him as one long pasuk, because Moshe is following the rules of Kri, and in Kri, it's pronounced in that way where the Kri is more important than the Ksiv. Just like in L'marbe HaMisra, even though we spell it with a final mem, but we read it like a regular mem, and that's what's more important. When it comes to the Tam Elyon and the Tam Tachton, the opinion of Rav Zalman Henna is we're always going to read it in the way that Moshe told Klal Yisrael, which is regular, consistent psukim. None of them too long and none of them too short, because the long and the short ones violate the principles of Tanakh. Namely, you don't have more than 43 words and you don't have less than 3 words. Hashem did that. That's okay. That's the Ksiv. The Ksiv is up in Shamayim. It's not that important what Hashem told Moshe. What's the Iker is what Moshe told Klal Yisrael, which is the Kri. That is the opinion of Reb Zalman Henna. Nobody does that. Only to do the Tam Tachton, even though we mentioned there was someone who did that. The Rambam. The Rambam only had the Tam Tachton. So even though we're going to see Rav Yaakov Emden wrote a sefer called Luach. Now, many people mispronounce it. They pronounce it Luach Eres. It's Luach Eresh from Areshes Sifasayim. Rav Yaakov Emden wrote a classic work of Diktuk called Luach Eresh. He says, I don't have to challenge Rav Zalman Henna. His words are self-destructive on their own. They have no standing. This is not what Tam Elyon and Tam Tachton means. Nobody would say you should just do the Tam Tachton. And Rav Yaakov Emden says, Eila divrei ruach v'chol ha'shomeya yitzchak lohi. These are empty words. Whoever hears them will just laugh. If you know Rav Yaakov Emden, he was being kind to Reb Zalman Henna with that comment. Okay? He says, what do we need to say? They're just divrei ruach v'chol ha'shomeya yitzchak lohi. Now, why then is it called Tam Elyon and Tam Tachton? Ready for this? He says, look very simply at the trup. In the Tam Tachton of what you have in the Chumash, all the trup are under the words Anoichi Hashem Elokecha Tibcha Darga Severe Mercha Tibcha Munach Mercha Severe Mercha Tibcha. They're all on the bottom. They're under the words. Oh, you come to the Tam Elyon. Anoichi. You have the Kadma. Asher hoitzeisi. You have the Tlisha Katana. Kadma v'azla. Tlisha Katana. Kadma v'azla. Revi. Pazer. Kadma v'azla. Revi. Munachzar. They're all on top of the word. That's the difference. That's why it's called. That is why it's called Tam Elyon and Tam Tachton. Tam Tachton means trup that are on the bottom of the word. Tam Elyon and trup on top of the word. Happens to be the trup that are on the bottom of the word are more tame. Trup on the top of the word are more dramatic. And it makes sense. The drama is saved for the dibros. The regular reading of the psukim is saved for personal study. Then Rabbi Yaakov Emden brings a raya By the way, there was once a conversation between the Panovich Rav and Ben Gurion. And Ben Gurion said, we both, the IDF, we have bitachon. Bitachon, what's bitachon? Is security. And the Panovich Rav said, no, we have bitachon. We have bitachon. So Ben Gurion said, what's the difference? He says, the difference is one's a milra and one's a mil-el. Milra means you have bitachon. It's a milra. Yours comes from the bottom. We have bitachon. It's a mil-el. It comes from on top. But that's a good way to remember. In Lashon Kodesh, there's certain words that are mil-el and some are milra. Every word in Lashon Kodesh is milra, which means you emphasize the end of the syllable, unless it's an exception. Okay, so V'zois ha-Torah, v'zois ha-bracha, asher beirach or beirach? Asher beirach, beirach. Moshe, for example, here's every single name in Tanakh is a milra. There's nobody Moshe in Tanakh. It's Moshe. You say Moshe, then you're just wrong. You're mispronouncing it. Or you're pronouncing it Yiddish. Yiddish, everything is mil-el. Lashon Kodesh, everything is milra. There's nobody Aharon. That's a Yiddish name. But when you read the Torah, it's Aharon. If you don't does everyone have to do it that way? No. Only if your mother is Jewish. If your mother is Jewish, you have to pronounce it milra. That's the halacha. It's not Mordche. Mordche is a guy in Borough Park. But the guy in Persia, he's Mardechai or Mardechai. Okay. The guy in Bar is a nice guy. His name, don't call him Mordechai. He's not going to like that. You call him Mordche. Moshe, Aharon. But if you read in the Torah, Aharon, so maybe you'll be Mekayim other mitzvahs that day. But, okay.
Torah.
What? Kairach is Malel. Yeah. There's a reason for that. But by default, every name is a milra. Now, why do I say that? Because as opposed to shamayim is a milel. It's not shamayim. It's not oretz. It's oretz. Okay. So some words are milel. So Rabbi Yehuda brings a raya from there that when it's first or on top, it's tam elyon. When it's last, it's tachtain. Rabbi Yaakov Emden, therefore, disagrees with Reb Zalman Henna's assertion that now I'm going to end off, or almost end off, with the kasha of Yaakov Emden. Frekt of Yaakov Emden, what do Ashkenazim do? Ashkenazim follow the opinion that we always, remember, Reb Zalman Henna says that the Sfardim follow Menachem di Lunsano, who said on Shavuos you read Tam Elyon. Reb Menachem di Lunsano said you always read Tam Elyon publicly, as opposed to the Ashkenazim that they only read Shavuos the Tam Elyon. So Rav Yaakov Emden slugs up the Ashkenazim. He said, really? You Ashkenazim, you only read the Tam Elyon on Shavuos? What Asar Sadibros do you read on Shavuos? Yisro or Voschanan? Anybody know? Any Jews here who might know? What are you laying on Shavuos? Which Asar Sadibros? Exactly, Yisro. Yisro. You lane Yisro. Could somebody tell me, according to the Ashkenazim, that only lane the Tam Elyon for Yisro, then why in the world is there a Tam Elyon for Voschanan? If according to the Ashkenazim, Tam Elyon is only for Shavuos, why is there a Tam Elyon on Parshas Voschanan? It's a raya to the Svardim that whenever you read B'tzibur, you read the Tam Elyon. That's why today, for some reason, nobody follows Minhag Ashkenaz. Everybody, as far as I know, every shul is reading Tam Elyon, B'tzibur always. Could be because of this kasha of Yaakov Emden. if the Tam Elyon is only laying on Shavuos, why in the world is it Tam Elyon, Pashas Vaschana? That's Rabbi Yaakov Emden's Kasha in the Luach Eresh. Comes the Bir Halacha, and he gives the following conclusion. He says, interesting, because the Rabbi Yaakov Emden had problems with this. The Mishnah Berurah and the Bir Halacha, Siman Tav Tzadi Daled, seems to say that the Tam Elyon is the Kri, and the Tam Tachton is the Ksiv. So he says like this. He says the Bir Halacha, the first approach makes out of every dibur pasuk echad, whether it's long or short, and that is the ksiv. That is the ksiv. The kri is one long pasuk from loy sirtzach loy sachmoid, makes one long pasuk out of it. That seems to be, to me, the exact opposite of Rav Zalman Henna. In other words, Rav Zalman Henna says you should always follow the Tam Tachton, and the Tam Tachton is the Kri. No, that seems to be what the Bir Halacha also refers to as the Kri. The Bir Halacha says the bottom line is there are two minhagim. That on Shavuot, some are noyeg, and this is what we said before was minhag Ashkenaz, to read the Tam Elyon on Shavuos, and for Yisro and Vaschanan, the Tam Tachton, and some always read the Tam Elyon. The Chazon Ish also was of the opinion they to always read the Tam Elyon B'tzibur. The Bir Halacha says when you learn B'yachid, you always use the Tam Tachton. Bottom line is, in most shows today, B'tzibur, they're going to read the Tam Elyon. When you're Maver Sedra, you're reading the Parashat, you always use the Tam Tachton. So this is a little bit of the significance and the various ramifications of these two sets of trup on the Asara Sadivrais. Okay, have a good night, everyone. Shkayach.